Good evening, guys. This is Paul, and this is the long-awaited part 2 of my 999 review. So, if you haven't watched that yet, sorry, my webcam makes everything backwards. Go do that. Now, if you watched that review, you'd know that I was going to say, from a Catholic perspective, what exactly can we get out of 999? Because this game is rated M for good reason. Unlike most games that the ESRB rates where the rating is kind of bogus, this game earns it. There's a lot of F-bombing, a lot of violence, though thankfully it's always described, it's never shown. Because this game uses a lot of dialogue. There's blood, there's a character that's referred to as Dancer when you first meet her because of her attire, stuff like that. You don't ever actually have to make any decisions that are immoral, but the way that the story plays out might be kind of mildly disturbing at first if you're not used to M-rated games. Like myself, for instance. The only M-rated game I've owned besides that was, like I said, Phoenix Wright Ace Attorney Dual Destinies, which, as you can imagine, is significantly more lighthearted. So when I went into this and first saw, quote, Dancer, I had to take a few weeks to sort of process, is this game worth playing? Thankfully, yes. Once I looked past that, got to know her a bit more, to know her scenario, it definitely made me feel better. And as I was thinking, okay, what can a Catholic get out of a game like this? I found at least 3 or 4 things that I'm willing to discuss with you that keeps this game in the moral high ground. One is the Clover. And let me just put a disclaimer right now. The true ending is going to be spoiled. And trust me, this is the kind of game that you want to experience it. You do not want to Google how it ends. You want to play through it and actually see it. So unless you can find a censored script, if you're squeamish, yeah, don't watch this if you haven't gotten the true ending yet. But anyway, so in the true ending, there's this clover that you can get, and apparently each of the 4 leaves on the clover stands for faith, hope, love, and trust. And of those 4, 3 of those are mentioned in the book of 1 Corinthians. They are the greatest virtues, according to St. Paul. And so love is surprisingly prominent in this game. There are at least 2 examples of brother and sister love. In the true ending, it's revealed that Santa and June are actually brother and sister. And, basically all of the effort Santa and June went through, because it turns out that they were the masterminds the whole time, it was all so that they could be a family again. And then you have Clover and Snake, where it's pretty obvious that they're brother and sister from the get-go. Because Clover looks way younger than Snake, and also not to mention the height difference between them is absolutely hilarious. Whether that was intentional or not, I don't know. That even more gives it away that they were brother and sister. But actually, it's pretty sad that Snake was actually one of my favorites of all the characters, and yet pretty early on in the game he actually gets abducted, and you don't see him again until when you're very, very near the end of the true ending. And there's only one other ending where you get to see him again at all. But when you do reunite him with Clover, there's this 5-minute long scene where they're just hugging each other. And it's so touching because I have a little sister myself, and yeah, I love her to pieces just as much as Snake and Clover love each other, if not more. And just there's this other ending where Clover ends up getting killed, and that's the one other ending that you actually do get to see Snake before the credits screen. And Snake's reaction is, yes, it's slightly disturbing because they refer to him as literally a snake sinking his fangs into his prey, but if we're thinking realistically, most older brothers probably would do that if their sister was killed. I mean, I'm no saint. I would probably act like Snake did. Um, God willing, I'd still make it to heaven, but I probably would react pretty similar if I was told that my sister was brutally murdered. Um, so yeah, love is a very key factor here. The characters are also very surprisingly sexually pure. Like I said, there's a character early on that's referred to as Dancer, but yet she never, like, how do I word this properly? She never really tries to seduce the characters as much as I think that they like allude to it at one point in the storyline, but the main character is very, very not interested. And even the character that he very clearly has feelings for, well, since I said I was spoiling the true ending, it's June. They don't actually end up getting together, but yet the game makes you think that they will. And they're, like I said, surprisingly pure. There are a lot of scenes where the two of them are alone, and yet they manage to maintain their sexual dignity. And I'm actually pretty sure Junpei was actually a virgin going into this game, and spoiler alert, still is by the end of the game, believe it or not. And that's pretty impressive for a game of this scale, especially when the next main character in the sequel is quite the perv. And the other thing I really got out of this game was uh, the whole multiple endings thing. It sort of they explain it a lot more in depth in the sequel, so I won't discuss it too much here sorry. I won't discuss it much here in case you want to play that game and not be spoiled, but the true ending with like Junpei being able to go back in time at the same time as June's going forward in time to save each other sort of reminds me of God's omnipotence, how because he's outside of time, like, our prayers in the future can affect things in the past and vice versa. So even if the game is not explicitly Christian in any way, like, they weren't trying to bring people closer to Christ by playing this game at all. Just, like, get that out of your head right now. If you're going into it hoping that it's an allegory, it's not. But yet, surprisingly, it snuck in anyway. Like, God's just that awesome, where a game like that, he can still make an impression. And especially the final puzzle of the game. Now, mind you, I was much more of a fan of the novel sections than the puzzle sections, because I know I mentioned that in my first review of the game. The game doesn't let you skip the puzzles, which was super annoying, especially because there's 6 endings, and if you make one wrong choice, you're back through the same old puzzles. And even if you have a walkthrough telling you exactly how to get all the endings, there are still some puzzles you have to repeat because you have to get all the other endings before you can get the true ending. So there's going to be repetition regardless. So anyway, the final puzzle. You have to solve it in order to save young Akane from the incinerator. And to put it into perspective, how uh, how powerful that puzzle was. For one, Morphogenetic Sorrow. Look that song up on YouTube, and if you like have recently lost a loved one, it'll like give you goosebumps. It's a very, very powerful song, despite it being synthesized and not having any lyrics. Um, that's playing, plus the incredible writing that the game has. Like, look past the F-bombs. This has one of the best scripts I've ever seen in a video game. Like, seriously, the level of detail in which the game describes everything is unprecedented. And yet they still manage to inject humor into some scenes too, despite the dark subject. Sorry, going on a tangent. The final puzzle. You're trying to save Akane from an incinerator, and you have to do a Sudoku puzzle. Now, I had never actually done a Sudoku puzzle when I got to that point in the game. I also had forgotten to save, and the game didn't give you an option to save during the puzzle. You also have to hold the DS, or in my case, the 3DS, upside down, so, like, I had to play it from your point of view this is how I had to play it, with the 3DS held like this, which is pretty awkward to begin with. And also, I had forgotten to bring my charger because I wasn't at home, and so my battery was on red, and I was like really terrified because I was like, I've never done a Sudoku puzzle in my life. I just read through like an hour of nonstop text. I'm not going to be able to save this puzzle. And yet at the same time, because of like the atmosphere, the music, seeing young Akane's face on the bottom screen, like the tears streaming down her face, even though it's just a video game, you feel like you're actually in the scenario. And when I finally did beat the puzzle, thank goodness, most of my friends told me it was an easy Sudoku. Um, I felt like I literally saved a little girl from an incinerator. And if you think about it, that's one of the corporal acts of mercy is like feeding the hungry, clothing the naked, greeting the stranger. So, in a sense, because of the realism of the puzzle, you almost feel like you're literally being a servant of Christ through the game. And yes, you may not encounter scenarios that extreme in real life, but it's definitely a good starting point for the moral high ground. So, if you felt as elated as I did saving Akane in a video game where it's fiction, you can only imagine how amazing mission trips must be for me, where actually get to do some of this stuff in real life, which there's no feeling in the world like it, my friends. So I would not recommend 999 if you're easily distracted by like what you see, because Lotus, with the way she dresses, could definitely turn on a few guys if they're not really strong in their faith. People could definitely get grossed out, Catholic or otherwise, with. Like I said, I'm just going to say it right now. No matter what ending you get, there's a man that gets blown up, and the game describes it. Very, very, very detailed. This game does not hold back on explanations of like how people die at all. Like it even describes what the characters are feeling as they're dying. Like that's how much they get into it. I also would not recommend this game if you are not much of a reader, because about 90% of this game is reading. Like, I kid you not, I might have been just nonstop reading for like 2 hours straight going into the ending. So if you're like my brother, where he pretty much just likes game and no reading, heck, when he plays Fire Emblem Radiant Dawn, he doesn't even know the scenarios of the battles he's in. He just loves it for being a tactical game, not for having one of the best storylines in video games, in my opinion. So yeah, if you're like him, this game is not for you. I mean, yes, there are puzzle rooms, but not nearly as much as the sheer amount of talking that they do. So as a Catholic, yeah, there's not much to recommend here, but there's enough where I'd say if you're a strong Catholic, and if you need motivation for doing service, this game is definitely the way to do it. And the whole faith, love, and hope and trust metaphor with the four-leaf clover, this video's already too long. I haven't really gotten around to it, but suffice to say, when in the true ending, when Junpei gives Clover the clover, he gives a very touching speech that I wouldn't be surprised if he was actually paraphrasing 1 Corinthians, because the way he describes how, like, we must have hope, but we have to have faith in each other, sort of like how St. Paul is encouraging us to, like, be the body of Christ with one another. Very, very solid morality, even if it's not explicitly mentioned as being Christian. So that's all I have for you right now. I'll definitely try to tackle video games and Catholicism in future videos, however way I can, because it's easier said than done. But hope you enjoyed this for now. Definitely stay tuned for my full recording, and until my next video, keep the faith, stay epic, and God bless. Bye.